Good morning, everyone. Today we'll be learning about genetics in science class. A few definitions we have to learn today are gene, allele, phenotype, genotype, and chromosome. So what a gene is what is passed down from a parent to an offspring. And so all the traits that you guys have, your hair color, your eye color, how big your mouth is or how small your mouth is, all of these are traits. And these get passed down through genes and through what's called DNA. So a gene contains your DNA. And what makes up DNA are these things called chromosomes. They kind of look like a butterfly because they have a small part up top and long parts in the bottom, and they make almost an X shape. What are on these chromosomes are called alleles. There's a little strip of a whole bunch, almost 1,000,000 alleles per gene. Each allele will code for a certain trait to be passed down. And so each trait then gets broken up into two groups, one a phenotype and a genotype. Both of them correspond together. A genotype is what the symbols are that make up that trait. That's what the DNA uses and what codes them. The phenotype is the information that we see on the actual human. A phenotype, how you can remember that, is pheno and physical, ph. Both have the F beginning with a PH. Fun. So, your phenotype is the trait that you can see, and your genotype is what you're using on what you call a Punnett square. A Punnett square is what you plug in the mom data and the dad data to mix up what genes are happening where. The outcome is called the probability of offspring. Probability can range from 25% up to 100% probability for a certain trait. Alright, so on your Punnett squares, it is a square that has 4 smaller squares inside of it. On the top, you have your mother's genes, which will be a capital letter or a lowercase letter. Now, when you line them up, they're going to be capital first and lowercase next. If neither or both are capital or lowercase, then that means they're just going to go straight on, one on each box on top. On the side are your father's genes. That's when you're going to put his uppercase first and lowercase next. Unless they're both the same, then it doesn't matter what order they go in on the side. Now inside, what you're going to do is you take the top right and the top left and you come down and you mix them in the square. So that if the mom has a capital H and the dad has a capital H together, there are going to be 2 capital H's next to each other. As you can see in the picture that I have provided in this video, that the H's combined together now go together. The red indicates the mom and the blue indicates the dad. So when you're looking at a Punnett square, it's used to show the probability of an outcome of a trait. And so when that probability is created, you have all 4 squares filled out with some kind of mix of genes. There could either be double dominant, which means both are uppercase letters or capital letters, double recessive, meaning they're both lowercase letters, or they're mixed, which means they're uppercase and lowercase. Now, if you have an uppercase and a lowercase, that means it is still dominant because the uppercase letter is still bigger than the recessive. So that is what trait is going to come out. If you have 2 capitals, that's going to stay dominant. If you have 2 lowercase, it's going to be a recessive outcome. Looking at your Punnett square, if you have a mom that is big A, little a, and a dad that is double big A, your probability is going to be 1 box is going to have double upper A. 3 boxes are going to have upper A, little a. So what you're going to do is the probability of that is going to be 100% dominant because no little a was matched up with another little a, making a recessive. So using that idea, what you're going to remember is for a mnemonic, or a little trick to remember the difference between dominant and recessive, is if it's dominant, it's big. And if you think about it, either in a game, like a sports game or a board game, you want to dominate the competition. You want to be bigger or be the winner. So that's how you're going to remember being a dominant letter is going to be the bigger letter. Okay, class, for our probability review, what we're going to remember is because our Punnett square has 4 boxes in it, it's the same as if it was each broken up into 4 pieces of pie. So if you remember, if you shade in one piece, that means it's 1/4. That also equals 25%. If you shade in 2, that's 1/2 or 50%. And then if you shade in 3, it's 75%. And if you shade in all 4, that's 100% of the square. And so if you want to think about it easier in terms of money, you have 1 square filled in is 25 cents, is 1/4. 2 filled in is 50 cents, or 2/4. 3, 3/4, 75%, and 4 is the full dollar, or 100%. Now, if you look at the examples that I've given for probability review on your Punnett squares, trait is going to depend on what trait you're trying to decipher. So, if you have let's say you're talking about fur, you could say dark fur and light fur. So, the darker fur, because it is dominant, will be a capital F. But light fur, because it's recessive, will be a lowercase f. So I used A's as my example. If you want, you can say that's type of apples if it makes it easier. But if both parents are capital A, then your box is going to be 100% dominant because there's no way a recessive gene can come out of it. If you have one parent that is all dominant and one parent that is dominant recessive, then you're still going to have 100% dominant because when you go and do your Punnett square, you're going to see one has double A that are dominant, and the rest are going to be double A with a recessive. There's no way for a recessive A to be matched up with another. But if your parent is going to be, if both parents are lowercase a on both sides, then it's going to be 100% recessive. Now, if we look at it, let's say on the recessive one, both parents are dominant recessive. So that means mom is capital A little a and dad is also capital A little a. If you look at capital A little a, you're going to match them together. If you have a capital A and a little lowercase a, they match up capital A and capital A, which makes it dominant. You go across, you go capital A little a, and that's still dominant with big A little a. You go down, capital A little a, and then you go to the bottom right corner, and that's little a little a. So your probability of having a dominant trait is going to be 75% because 3 boxes are full for a dominant trait. 1 box is left for a recessive trait, which means it's going to be 25%. So if you add 25 to 75, you get 100%. When we do our probability and Punnett square activity, it might be easier if you take a highlighter, one color for dominant and one color for recessive. That way you can shade in what box is what to help with the percentages later. Alright, so our last part of this activity is talking about how my genetics are important. A lot of times we see the genetic mixing of 2 parents to see what offspring are made in rehabilitation centers or zoos that rescue animals. A lot of times when scientists use this, it's to see what species is created or what traits and outcomes are passed down from 2 different parents or 2 alike parents in an animal species in the animal kingdom. Now, is it possible for the outcome to not match the genetic probability that we've created on our Punnett squares? Yes, 100%. If a lot of times in nature, when you do a Punnett square, it's probability. Probability shows a percent that it could happen. However, there is still a chance that it doesn't. Even with 100% probability in our squares, sometimes offspring tend to have the opposite trait. That's how sometimes you see parents who are both have really dark hair, but their kid could be very blonde or very light haired. Now, for the activity later, if it happens that it is 50% and 50%, I want you guys to rock, paper, scissors, or roll the dice again to see whether or not that your buddy gets one trait or the other. I know that now that I've told you probability doesn't always seem the correct way, I still want you guys to use the most probable answer created out of your dice rolling and Punnett square activity. Great job today, everybody. I hope you enjoyed this lesson, and I hope you really enjoy creating a buddy later with using genetic probability.